Hello again, it's Jo Ann from Adult Services, back with you to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Here's a bit of historical background, courtesy of the Women's Vote Centennial website. Suffragists began their organized fight for women's equality in 1848 when they demanded the right to vote during the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York. For the next 72 years, women leaders lobbied, marched, picketed, and protested for the right to the ballot. The U.S. House of Representatives finally approved the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which guaranteed women the right to vote, on May 21, 1919. The U.S. Senate followed 2 weeks later, and the 19th Amendment went to the states, where it had to be ratified by 3/4 of the then 48 states to be added to the Constitution. By a vote of 50-47, Tennessee became the last state needed to ratify the 19th Amendment on August 18, 1920. Secretary of State Bainbridge Colby issued a proclamation declaring the 19th Amendment ratified and part of the U.S. Constitution on August 26, 1920, forever protecting American women's right to vote. Today, more than 68 million women vote in elections because of the courageous suffragists who never gave up the fight for equality. While we celebrate the anniversary of women gaining the legal right to vote, it is important to mention that it would be decades until all women were able to practice voting freely. We've assembled an impressive display of recently released books in the main library, calling out all aspects of women's lives, both past and present. Here is a brief preview of several. Suffrage, Women's Long Battle for the Vote by Carroll Du Bois. Dr. Du Bois, Distinguished Research Professor of History and Gender Studies at UCLA, has been researching and writing about the women's suffrage movement for her entire career. She begins in the pre-Civil War years with foremothers Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Sojourner Truth, as she explores the links of the women's suffrage movement to the abolition of slavery. Dr. Du Bois explains how suffragists built a determined coalition of moderate lobbyists and radical demonstrators in forging a strategy of winning voting rights in crucial states to set the stage for securing suffrage for all American women in the Constitution. In vivid prose, Du Bois describes suffragists' final victories in Congress and state legislatures, culminating in the last, most difficult ratification in Tennessee. Pretty Bitches, edited by Lizzie Skernick. Journalist Skernick curates a sharp-witted and intimate essay collection examining how language is used to disempower women. Each piece addresses a single word, as writers including Laura Lippman, Dahlia Lithwick, Rebecca Traister, and Meg Wolitzer take on supposedly admiring adjectives such as nurturing, sweet, outright slurs such as shrill, crazy, and veiled insults such as ambitious and feisty. The Watergate Girl, My Fight for Truth and Justice Against a Criminal President by Jill Wine Banks. From the publisher. Obstruction of Justice, The Specter of Impeachment, Sexism at Work, Shocking Revelations. Jill Wine Banks takes us inside her trial by fire as a Watergate prosecutor. It was a time much like today when Americans feared for the future of their democracy, and women stood up for equal treatment. At the crossroads of the Watergate scandal and the women's movement was a young lawyer named Jill Wine Vollner, barely 30 years old, and the only woman on the team that prosecuted the highest-ranking White House officials. Called the mini-skirted lawyer by the press, she fought to receive the respect accorded her male counterparts and prevailed. The indomitable Florence Finch, the untold story of a war widow turned resistance fighter and savior of American POWs, by Robert J. Mrazek. When Florence Finch died at the age of 101, few of her Ithaca, New York neighbors knew that this unassuming Filipina native was a Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient, whose courage and sacrifice were unsurpassed in the Pacific War against Japan. Long accustomed to keeping her secrets close in service of the Allies, she waited 50 years to reveal the story of those dramatic and harrowing days to her own children. Wandering in Strange Lands by Morgan Jerkins. Quote from Literary Hub. Journalist and essayist Jerkins journeys to discover her ancestral lineage against the backdrop of the Great Migration, the period from 1910 to 1970, when 6 million blacks left the South for other parts of the country. Her careful research and revelatory conversations with historians, activists, and genealogists result in a disturbing yet ultimately empowering chronicle of the African American experience. Readers will be moved by this brave and inquisitive book. And lastly, The Smallest Lights in the Universe, by Sarah Seeger. Canadian MIT astrophysicist Sarah Seeger interweaves the story of her search for meaning and solace after losing her first husband to cancer, her unflagging search for an Earth-like exoplanet, and her unexpected discovery of new love. Explore these and many other books that document this monumental event. Remember, it's not only about history, but her story. Thanks for watching.